So the second step now to importing our pupils from Excel is to understand the template that we'll be using to import this pupil. So we have this template. Of course, if you have to import this on your own, if you haven't sent your Excel file to us, and you have to do, of course, that's the purpose of this video actually, so that you can do this work on your own, because it's really quite involving. So you can do it on your own, and unless you get stuck, then you can request for assistance. So this template has the following columns, which you must actually use as is. You do not need to shift. If you shift these columns around, you might get an error, because the system expects to read this data in the way that it is specified as you're seeing in this template. So this starts with the last name of the student, and then the first name of the student, then the date of birth, the sex, and then the date of admission, the grade they were admitted in. And here there's an example. Okay, so here you have an example of a pupil. That's the last name, Chapla Malambo. Date of birth, there's nothing, so you leave it blank. And then you have the sex. Now for most schools, I know that most schools use F, like F for female and M for male, but in this in our system we actually use the full words like male and female. So you'd have to change, and I'm going to show you a simple formula that you can use to transform your F's into female and your M's into male. Alright, so you don't need to worry about that. And then the date of admission, very important. The system requires that you specify date of admission. So all these here are mandatory. So the columns that are mandatory here, it's the last name, the date of birth. I mean the last name, the first name, not date of birth. The last name, first name, the sex, the date of admission, the grade they were admitted in, the current grade, and the class. These are the mandatory columns which you cannot leave blank. Everything else you can leave blank, except I'm going to show you another one which is mandatory towards the end, which is the school ID. Okay, so and then remark here you could put the class ID. So the class ID, this is where we'll be putting those class IDs that we generated. So you can see, for example, this PP belongs to 10A morning, and how you'll be getting this is you simply go to that Excel sheet we generated with class IDs here. You basically copy, for example, that if you're talking about a PP in 8A, and you paste it here. So the idea is to create one list of all the pupils, not the way, if you look at this data from Terry, what they did was that each class has got its own separate sheet, like that. Okay, and this data is not really in the way that we want it in the system. That's why you must do this data pre-processing. You must put your data in one template, and then that's the template that you read in one file, and that's the file that you read. Okay, so you cannot use something like this. So that's why we will give you this template that you can use to input your data, and that's the one that I'm showing you how to use. And remember, I said the mandatory columns here, it's the last name, the first name, the sex, date of admission, grade admitted in, current grade, which class, which yeah, I mean the class ID. So remark, if you have things like let's say that you have a hostel number that you've assigned to this pupil, you could actually put that under remark if your school is a boarding school, for example, because in the system you can only specify whether somebody is a boarder or a day scholar at the moment, especially this desktop one, but you cannot specify their hostel number, which hostel are they in. So then we provided this this remark field for you to type in anything like whether you know, like the hostel number or anything you want to put in there. That's a remark there, but you can leave it blank, it's not mandatory. Then you have the computer ID. So there are some schools that already assigned certain numbers to their students, and if you had that, you can put it here. Then the system will ignore, like it will not create a new computer ID for that people. It will use this one. Otherwise, just leave it blank, and the system will automatically create a computer ID for them. And yeah, then you have township ID. So if you have created, so there's some data that we had where others actually even know the township. So this one belongs to, say, whichever, Dambwa or Livingstone, whatever it is, or so you can put the names here. But I would advise against that for now. Maybe you can update it later for the pupils, so you can leave it blank. If you wish to add townships, you need to contact us probably. Then you have the church ID and religion ID. So the best for these would be it would mean that you have to first of all create the townships in the system. Like here you'd have to go to locations, and then you go to townships, and then you'd have to add all those townships. Once you add the townships, you export them, and so if you right click here, right click and say column chooser, this will show you the township ID. So each of these townships has got an ID. So this is the ID that you'd actually have to get and then paste for each PP. You know that, oh, this is a township, so you have to paste it here and put the ID. The same thing for the churches. So when you go to the system, you go to churches. So oh, this PP I'm adding belongs to Anglican, so you know the ID. So if you right click, so this number you're saying is not the ID, you right click and say I want to see the church ID. So the church ID, for example, for Anglican is 43. So that's what you'd put here. You put 43 there. The same thing for the religions, and that is why most schools don't even have this information when they're adding their Excel sheet. So you don't have to worry about it, because in most cases you won't have the info. So just leave it blank. Then the parent type, this is necessary because for each PP that you add, there's a parent record that is created. So here's an example. Parent type, you leave it as father. In most cases, if you want to do something quick, just put father here, and the system will also automatically pull the last name of the pupil and just put it as the father's name. Later on, you can start changing these details. You can start updating. So if you go under enrollment, when you're adding a pupil, there's this parent or guardian detail. So later, if you want to start updating details of the pupils, you can start adding things like the father's name, mother's name, father's occupation, and all these things. Okay. Now, what would also be necessary is, if you already have the phone numbers for these pupils, the phone numbers for parents and email addresses, you add them here. So for each one, if you have the email, you put the email there. If there's a phone number, you put it there. Okay, and then you have the occupation of the parent. The parent that you put here is, say, father. It could be mother. The type could be mother or father. You put the occupation if you have it, otherwise leave it blank. If you have the exam number, you put it there. Then the school ID, here should always be 1. When you're using this system as a single school, the ID of your school always be 1, so you leave it that way. So basically, this is the template that we'll be using. So in most cases, like in this case that we'll be adding this data for Terry, you'll see that most of the columns will be entering is just the last name, first name, sex, date of admission, grade admitted, current grade, class ID. The rest will be skipped. And then for parent, we're just going to say father, and we want the system to automatically pull the last name, to pick the last name and put it there, so that when it creates a record for this pupil, it will just show the father there and the name of the father. Okay, and they do not have any phone numbers, so we're not going to do that. But in your case, if you have, just remember that you can put them here. And then for school ID, we're just going to put 1. Good. So this is our template, and in the next video now I'm going to show you how you actually begin to organize your data and begin to put it in here. Alright, so that'll be the more exciting part.